The stillness of early morning in London was abruptly broken by a single name, Tom Bower. To many, that name evokes memories of explosive exposés and rigorously documented royal scandals. But this time, Bower wasn't dealing in whispers or speculation. He came forward with what he claimed was hard, damning proof. Proof that didn't just shake reputations, it called into question the very existence of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's children, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. Yes, you heard that right. According to Bower, there was reason to doubt whether the children were even real. This wasn't some clickbait headline or idle chatter from a fringe podcast. This was Tom Bower, known for wielding his pen like a scalpel and never missing his mark. When Bower speaks, the press leans in, and the royal establishment braces itself. In his latest explosive dossier, Bower suggests that Harry and Meghan's carefully curated image as modern, devoted parents may have been as meticulously staged as a Hollywood production. The cheerful photos, heartfelt interviews, birthday videos, all of it, he claims, could be part of a larger illusion. To understand how we arrived at this extraordinary claim, we have to rewind back to a time before the royal family found itself under siege. Before Oprah's bombshell interview rocked the monarchy. Before two royal children became the center of courtroom drama, conspiracy theories, and now, a staggering allegation. Meghan Markle, once a charismatic American actress, captured global attention when she became a duchess. Prince Harry, the spirited royal who defied expectations to follow love across the Atlantic, seemed eager to build a life far from the palace's traditions. Together, they embodied a new era, modern, diverse, international, and deeply in love. Then came Archie. His birth was hailed as a new chapter for the royal family, an emblem of unity and progress. The media captured Harry's proud smile and Meghan's glowing warmth as a new mother. It all felt so genuine. Later, their daughter Lilibet was born, reportedly in California, and named in tribute to Queen Elizabeth, a nod that further anchored their place in royal legacy. For a while, the couple portrayed themselves as protective parents, shielding their children from relentless media glare. And the world, for the most part, accepted that. But Tom Bower didn't. According to his investigation, those rare public glimpses, the soft birthday videos, Archie's glimpse curls, might not just be strategic PR. They might be entirely staged. Bower's claims go deeper. He suggests that the children either don't exist, as we've been led to believe, or that their identities and timelines have been so heavily manipulated that the public has been deceived from the start. And he doesn't make such claims without cause. With over 4 decades in investigative journalism, Bower has exposed corrupt executives, toppled politicians, and peeled back layers of royal secrecy. So why take aim at Harry and Meghan now? Insiders say Bower had long harbored doubts about the Sussex's narrative, but it was a set of leaked documents and insider tips that convinced him this wasn't just a story. It was a revelation. Hospital records that don't match. Birth certificates with questionable details. Gaps in public appearances that once seemed like parental caution now appear deeply suspicious. It's not just the children's absence from the public eye. It's the complete lack of independent verification that raises concern. And if Bower's findings are accurate, the consequences are staggering. These children aren't ordinary. Archie and Lilibet are 7th and 8th in the line of succession. Their existence and legitimacy touches on royal titles, future inheritances, and potentially the constitutional fabric of the monarchy itself. Their existence, or the possibility that it's been fabricated, doesn't just impact Meghan and Harry's public image. It carries weight at a constitutional level. If Bower's allegations hold any truth, it would mean the monarchy itself has been deceived by 2 of its most scrutinized members. And Meghan Markle, according to sources inside the palace and those close to her, is not quietly weathering the storm. She's not just upset, she's livid. To Meghan, Bower's latest claims amount to a full-blown character attack. She's reportedly considering legal action. Her legal team is already dissecting every word of the report, while her public relations advisors are scrambling to craft counter-narratives in an attempt to salvage her image. But insiders say things behind closed doors are far from under control. Someone within Meghan's inner circle revealed that the timing of this leak caught her completely off guard. This was supposed to be her comeback year, a clean slate, complete with new ventures, fresh endorsements, and even a rumored book centered on motherhood. Now all of that is hanging by a thread. This isn't just a PR crisis. If Bauer's claims continue to spread, and they already are, governmental bodies might be forced to intervene. While Parliament has yet to comment, watchdog groups and a tidal wave of voices online are demanding an investigation. As for the royal family, true to form, they've remained silent, but observers say that silence could be speaking volumes. Because the real question now isn't just if Archie and Lilibet exist. It's why no one seems able to prove that they do. In an era where digital records are everywhere, where hospital visits are logged and birth details are documented, how is it that so little can be confirmed? Why are such basic details, where they were born, which doctors were present, who signed the records, so tightly shielded? Theories are spreading like wildfire. Some people believe the children are real, but that their public images have been carefully manipulated for privacy. Others think Meghan and Harry use surrogates and are hiding that fact due to royal traditions or personal reasons. Then there's the more extreme theory, one gaining traction on social media, that the children were fabricated altogether, used to generate sympathy, build a brand, and secure royal titles, with dolls or stand-ins appearing at staged events. It may sound outrageous, but viral videos dissecting supposed inconsistencies in the children's photos and appearances have given these claims surprising momentum. Now, to be clear, Tom Bauer never outright says the children don't exist. What he does say is that there's no reliable, verifiable institutional proof that Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor are real, living individuals as the public has been led to believe. And that, in itself, is enough to set off alarm bells. Imagine if Parliament demanded DNA verification or legal birth documentation to confirm the line of succession. What if Lilibet had never been born? What if Archie was not who we've been told he is? What if the whole narrative, a family seeking freedom and authenticity, was orchestrated not from behind palace gates, but from a California estate fortified with security gates, spin doctors, and camera crews? We're now standing in completely uncharted territory. And once again, Tom Bauer has thrown the royal chessboard into chaos, sending pieces flying across Buckingham's corridors and shattering the illusion of stability. Whether people believe him or not, the effect is undeniable. The world isn't just watching, it's holding its breath. Meghan stands cornered. Harry remains publicly silent. And somewhere between the headlines and the palace gates lies a mystery that could fundamentally reshape what we thought we knew about the royal family. And according to Bauer, this is just the beginning. Long before the world gasped at the possibility that Meghan Markle's children might not be real, before headlines accused the Sussexes of constructing a royal facade rooted in illusion, there was one man quietly piecing together the puzzle. That man is Tom Bauer. And to grasp the full impact of his latest bombshell, you need to understand exactly who he is and why his name evokes both fear and respect in powerful circles. Bauer isn't a tabloid columnist or a celebrity biographer spinning fluff for quick clicks. He's a relentless investigative journalist with a track record built on exposing what others would rather keep hidden. With a background as a barrister and a BBC reporter, Bauer forged his journalistic instincts in courtrooms and broadcast newsrooms, where he learned to interrogate systems and challenge the powerful. His work has targeted figures across politics, finance, and royalty, anyone who believed they were untouchable. Bauer has dismantled empires. He's published damning exposés on media magnates like Richard Desmond, chronicled the fall of press lords like Conrad Black, and scrutinized billionaire elites like Mohammed Al-Fayed. He was one of the first to publicly challenge the myth of Robert Maxwell, long before his name became synonymous with scandal. And his biography, Rebel Prince, stripped away the carefully maintained veneer of Prince Charles, exposing the petty insecurities behind the future monarch's public charm. But it was revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the war between the Windsors that truly jolted public perception of the Sussexes, unraveling a narrative of romantic rebellion and revealing Instead, a bitter tale of ambition and fractured loyalties. So when Tom Bower raises a red flag, the media pays attention. When he warns that the Sussex story may be built on shifting sand, the palace grows quiet. And when he dares to suggest, even without explicitly saying so, that the children at the heart of that story might not exist in the way we've been led to believe, it sends shockwaves from Windsor to Hollywood. But this wasn't some overnight epiphany. Bower's interest in Harry and Meghan began as it did for many. Curious, cautious, even sympathetic. An American actress marrying into Britain's most rigid institution was bound to provoke cultural friction. But the deeper Bower looked, the more he noticed cracks in the story, threads no one else was tugging on. In earlier reports, he had already pointed out inconsistencies. Meghan's alleged manipulation of media coverage, her carefully managed public image, her rumored conflicts with palace staff, and Harry's growing distance from his royal relatives. But eventually, Bower's focus shifted, not just to what the Sussexes were doing, but to what they weren't showing. The glaring lack of hard proof about their children. While many dismissed the missing photos, unconfirmed hospital details, and sparse public appearances as a matter of privacy, Bower saw a pattern. A deliberate refusal to share verifiable facts. A resistance to letting the public or institutions confirm something as basic and critical as the births of Archie and Lilibet. And that's when Bower got to work. He didn't rely on hearsay or anonymous whispers. As always, he built his case step by step, relying on documentation and trusted sources. According to insiders, he began by investigating the California birth records, reportedly where Lilibet was born. He cross-checked media announcements with hospital databases, private registries, and contacts who had knowledge of the events behind the scenes. Every name, every date, every claim was examined and compared. What he found, or didn't find, formed the foundation of what is now his most explosive suggestion yet. Bower meticulously pieced together the timeline, interviewing hospital staff who had been on duty in Santa Barbara during the week Lilibet was reportedly born. He tried to verify Meghan's medical appointments, but according to leaked excerpts from his upcoming report, what he uncovered was deeply unsettling. The paperwork didn't align. The timeline was full of contradictions. People who should have been able to confirm key details had nothing to say. Even more troubling, the hospitals involved had no official, or even informal, recollection of the events as described by Meghan and Harry's public team. If this were an isolated inconsistency, it might be dismissed. But when Bower turned to investigate Archie's birth, the same troubling pattern surfaced. There were no hospital photos of the newborn. The press release was delayed and oddly vague. Conflicting reports circulated about the location of the birth. Some said Portland Hospital in London. Others weren't sure at all. Even royal correspondents noted at the time how unusually secretive the entire process was. For Bower, these weren't accidents or personal choices. They were signs of deliberate obfuscation. His theory began to crystallize. This wasn't just about privacy. Meghan and Harry were actively building a narrative around their children that couldn't be fact-checked. And in a world where royal lineage and constitutional succession depend on public transparency, such actions raise more than just eyebrows. They raise legal red flags. Still, Bower understood that a theory of this magnitude couldn't rely on coincidences or vague implications. So he expanded his investigation. He contacted former palace staff, ex-NHS employees, private security consultants, even public relations aides who had once worked with Meghan during her Hollywood days. Over the course of several months, he gathered interviews, insider quotes, and confidential documents. While much of the material remains sealed for legal protection, the pieces that have been released are already shaking public discourse. One source quoted in Bower's early notes claimed that whispers of something being off had circulated within the palace for years. Staff members had noticed the absence of medical records, the carefully managed silence from those in the know. It all felt too controlled, too scripted. Another insider revealed that even Queen Elizabeth herself had quietly expressed confusion as to why she hadn't spent proper time with the children. This wasn't just gossip, it was coming from the heart of the monarchy. But how does Bower gain access to such high-stakes revelations? when others shy away? The answer lies in his defining trait: fearlessness. He's faced lawsuits, intimidation, and smear attempts from billionaires, corporations, even heads of state, and still pressed forward. He has been sued repeatedly, but his work stands up under legal scrutiny. That's because he doesn't rely on guesswork. Every claim he makes is supported by layers of verification: documents, audio files, signed affidavits, and cross-check timelines. His books don't just stir controversy. They present legally defensible dossiers. So when Bauer speaks, even if the palace stays silent, it listens. There's something quietly unnerving about Bauer's calm approach. He doesn't yell. He doesn't dramatize. He lets the facts speak for themselves, and the fallout does the shouting. In interviews, he stays composed and direct. When recently questioned about the Meghan and Harry situation, his response was simple and unwavering. The public has a right to know whether the monarchy is being used for personal gain, and I have reason to believe it is. This isn't a man who deals in speculation or vague theories. Tom Bauer has built his career by transforming whispers into evidence and silence into court-admissible material. And now, as Meghan Markle and Prince Harry find themselves at the center of what may be one of the most bizarre and damaging royal controversies in recent memory, Bauer stands once more at the heart of it all, pen in hand, files at the ready. Naturally, the question arises: who stands to gain from Bauer's revelations? Critics suggest he holds a grudge against the Sussexes, pointing to the sharply critical tone of his past works. But those familiar with his methods know better. This isn't about revenge. It's about process. For Bauer, it's never been personal. It's investigative. He doesn't pursue vendettas. He pursues facts. And if those facts happen to dismantle one of the most carefully engineered PR machines in modern royal history, then that, for him, is simply collateral truth. The impact of his current investigation has already been explosive. Within just 48 hours of excerpt from his upcoming report being leaked online, the hashtag #WhereIsLilibet began trending across multiple social platforms. Clips from Meghan and Harry's past interviews were dissected by online sleuths, hunting for contradictions and inconsistencies. News crews flooded Santa Barbara hospitals and government offices. Former allies of the royal couple began issuing vague statements, more like strategic distancing than genuine defense. Meanwhile, Bauer has said nothing. Not yet, because he's not done. According to insider sources, his upcoming full-length book will contain material the public has never seen before. We're talking about sworn affidavits, leaked emails between royal aides and hospital officials, maybe even surveillance footage or internal recordings, evidence that was never supposed to surface. And Bauer, in classic fashion, is waiting for the perfect moment to let it all out. When he does, it may not just reshape Meghan Markle's public identity, it could dismantle it completely. In today's world, image isn't just important, it's everything. And if it turns out that the most polished royal portrait in recent memory, the radiant couple and their two picture-perfect children, is even partially constructed, then the consequences won't just affect their reputation. The shockwaves will be constitutional, legal, and historical. This is no tabloid chase. It's Tom Bauer's battle for the truth, and he's only getting started. Tom Bauer didn't just wake up one day and decide to accuse Meghan Markle and Prince Harry of fabricating the story of their children. Claims like that aren't made on impulse or speculation. They require months of painstaking investigation, sifting through digital records, examining legal loopholes, cross-checking conflicting public statements, and listening carefully to the whispers of those closest to the story. It takes long nights, encrypted conversations, and off-the-record meetings in quiet corners of cafes. But in this case, the real spark came from something unexpected: a leak. According to insiders familiar with Bauer's investigation, it began with a cryptic message passed through an anonymous source. A former member of the Sussex household had reached out to a royal journalist who had previously collaborated with Bauer. The message was brief but jarring, just enough to stop the journalist in their tracks. Tell Bauer to dig deeper. The births didn't happen the way they said. Records don't match. People have been silenced. Most tips like this can be tossed aside, They usually come from disgruntled fans or conspiracy theorists with no access and even less credibility. But this one stood out. The source wasn't a tabloid writer or online commentator. They had real access, inside access. They had once signed a non-disclosure agreement connected to the Sussexes and weren't acting alone. That was enough to catch Bauer's attention. His investigative instincts kicked in, but he didn't go straight to Meghan or Harry, nor did he start with the Royal Press Office or even Kensington Palace. Instead, he went back to the beginning, the birth announcements. The public statement about Archie Harrison's birth had raised eyebrows from the start. It was oddly vague, released after a delay, and lacked the usual royal details. No mention of the hospital, no attending doctor, no timestamp. Traditionally, the royal family is meticulous with such statements, often listing the hospital name, delivery time, and medical team involved. With Archie, it was all shadows and silence. Initial reports claimed Meghan had gone into labor early in the morning, but as the days passed, the story began to fray. No one could confirm the exact hospital. No one could say for sure who had been present. Some weren't even certain the birth had taken place in a hospital at all. So Bauer followed the trail to Royal Maternity Services in the UK, specifically Portland Hospital in London, which was widely assumed to be the delivery site. He contacted former staff, including those no longer bound by official secrecy. Some had retired, moved abroad, or simply felt safe enough to speak, under strict conditions of anonymity. One nurse, whose identity remains concealed in Bauer's preliminary report, reportedly said, "We never saw them. Not once. There was no royal lockdown. No extra security. We had 3 other high-profile births that week, and none involved Meghan." And that raised a powerful point. How could one of the most famous women in the world give birth in a major London hospital without a trace? There was no road closure, no visible security presence, no eyewitness accounts of the couple entering or leaving, no photos of the baby being taken out in a carrier. When images were eventually released, they were heavily staged, just Meghan and Harry holding what appeared to be a baby inside Windsor Castle. But the public never saw Archie in those crucial first moments. So Bauer turned his attention to California. Lilibet Diana, according to official reports, was born at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, a respected, well-equipped private facility not far from the couple's Montecito residence. This time, the birth announcement was quicker, made through a spokesperson and instantly picked up by media outlets worldwide. The release said she was born on June 4th and named after Queen Elizabeth II's childhood nickname, Lilibet, and Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland. But once again, beneath the polished statement, the details seemed just a little too convenient, and Bauer was already preparing to look beyond the surface. Once again, the records didn't offer the clarity one might expect. In contrast to the UK, American birth certificates, at least in summary form, are often accessible through public record requests. Bauer, working through legal channels and investigative contacts in California, submitted multiple inquiries. What came back was troublingly inconsistent. Yes, Lilibet's birth was technically registered, but key portions of the documents were redacted. When Bauer's team attempted to access hospital records, they were blocked due to privacy laws. But behind that legal wall, something else caught their attention. A source embedded in the hospital's administrative operations told Bauer there had been no sign of heightened security around the time of the alleged birth. This individual had reviewed internal shift logs, access records, and guest entries for that weekend and insisted that there were no special precautions taken, no royal protection team, no restricted access, no trace of anything out of the ordinary. For a couple as internationally recognized as Harry and Meghan, that kind of silence was, in Bauer's view, suspicious. At the same time, another thread began to tug at his curiosity. In their Netflix documentaries and televised interviews, Meghan and Harry rarely showed their children clearly. Faces were blurred, shots were taken from afar, and when high-quality photos were shared, usually for special occasions, they often seemed off. The proportions, lighting inconsistencies, and subtle irregularities in clothing tags triggered a sense of something uncanny, something constructed. It wasn't just Bauer who noticed. Digital analysts, and independent sleuths online began dissecting these images frame by frame. Some even proposed that artificial intelligence or digital manipulation might have been used. But Bauer knew blurry theories wouldn't hold weight. He needed something concrete. So he shifted focus to metadata, IP trails, and timestamps embedded in the original image files. With the help of a digital forensics team, he managed to secure high-resolution versions of 3 widely circulated photographs of Archie and Lilibet, each associated with major public holidays. Forensic analysis revealed inconsistencies. One photo, supposedly taken during a summer celebration, had a timestamp indicating it was actually created 6 months earlier, and from a device that didn't match any Meghan had been seen using during that time. Then came the most damning lead yet. Bauer received a batch of confidential documents from an anonymous source connected to a financial audit of one of the Sussex's charitable foundations. Buried in the internal notes were references to repurposed family content, pre-filmed child footage, and controlled release scheduling designed for emotional PR moments. These weren't direct admissions of deception, but the implications were undeniable. If content showcasing the children had been crafted with brand strategy in mind, the line between authentic documentation and performance blurred dangerously. Suddenly, the question wasn't just about privacy, it was about manipulation. By now, Bauer was no longer operating alone. His quiet inquiry had become a whisper spreading through elite media circles in both London and New York. Was he about to unravel the Sussex narrative at its core? Some are already calling it the biggest royal crisis since Edward VIII's abdication. Then another leak. A private audio recording surfaced, allegedly capturing a conversation between 2 former royal aides. In it, one voice is heard saying, "We all knew something wasn't right. There was a child, but only when the cameras were on. Off camera, nothing. No sounds, no toys, just stillness." Though unverified, the recording intensified speculation. Meanwhile, inside Montecito, sources reported rising paranoia. Meghan and Harry's team was reportedly locking down archives, deleting or editing previously posted images, and retroactively adjusting timelines of public appearances. Social media managers were instructed to blur faces or remove older content altogether. Journalists were warned via email not to entertain defamatory conjecture. But Bauer was undeterred. He expanded his network to include law enforcement advisors, archivists, and digital forensic experts. Among them was Dr. Samuel Lee, an AI and photo authentication specialist who consults for international governments. Over a 2-year span, he reviewed dozens of publicly released images of Lilibet. His findings were startling. In one photo, the lighting on the child's face and the shadow on Meghan's figure didn't match, an error common in composite images stitched together from separate sources. Dr. Lee wasn't quick to accuse, but when asked whether he would testify in court about his findings, his answer was firm. If asked, yes. With every new discovery, Bauer's investigation grew darker and more complex. This wasn't just about 2 children. It was about whether the public, media, fans, donors, and even governments had been deceived on a global scale. Whether a carefully orchestrated illusion had been sold as reality, propping up a multi-million-dollar brand image. And as the clues piled higher, Bauer came to a chilling realization. He was still far from reaching the bottom. When it comes to the royal family, secrecy is often mistaken for tradition. For generations, the British monarchy has kept personal matters cloaked behind palace walls. But even tradition has its limits, especially when the questions involve succession, lineage, and legal documentation. When Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor's birth was publicly announced, the world responded with admiration and curiosity. The name, clearly a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II, dominated headlines. Public statements applauded the couple's nod to royal heritage. But beyond the sentimental naming, there was little else to hold on to. There were no official photographs from the hospital, no detailed birth report, no concrete records from the medical facility said to be involved. It was as though Lilibet had arrived without leaving a single trace. To Tom Bauer, this silence wasn't just royal discretion, it was a void, the kind that suggested something was deliberately being withheld. He began his inquiry with the location. According to the Sussex's official statement, Lilibet was born at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, a reputable institution located near their Montecito home. On the surface, the claims seemed straightforward. But once Bauer attempted to verify the details, he ran into roadblocks. The hospital's staffing records and schedules from that weekend showed no signs of unusual activity. There were no records of enhanced security protocols, no alerts issued to staff, and no logistical changes that would normally accompany the presence of a high-profile patient. This immediately raised red flags. In any U.S. hospital, the birth of a royal child, even to a former royal, would require planning. Names would be scrubbed from public logs. Private areas might be secured. Select medical staff would be briefed and reassigned to the case. Yet according to everything Bauer uncovered, none of that happened. One retired employee, speaking anonymously, told Bauer there were no changes that week, nothing from the top. No lockdowns, no increased staffing. It was business as usual. Another nurse, interviewed separately, echoed the sentiment. If someone like Meghan Markle had given birth here, we would have known. There wasn't even a whisper. Next, Bauer focused on the official documentation. While California law restricts full access to birth certificates, summarized details are often obtainable through legal request. Bauer hired a Los Angeles-based legal investigator to acquire what was publicly available from Lilibet's birth record. What came back was cause for concern. A certificate did exist, but several elements had been unusually redacted. The attending physician's name was missing. Though the hospital was listed, the formatting appeared inconsistent, and the filing date raised questions. It had been processed nearly 2 weeks after the stated birth, despite standard protocol calling for submission within 48 hours. Bauer then turned to a forensic document expert, someone with experience exposing fraudulent federal filings. After reviewing Lilibet's certificate line by line, the expert flagged multiple irregularities. This doesn't look forged, the expert explained, but it doesn't conform to the formatting that office used during that period. Either it went through an unusual channel or it was processed in a non-standard way. And that, for a case of this profile, needs to be addressed. As Bauer's findings deepened, so did the resistance around him. Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital's public relations team refused to answer direct questions, citing patient confidentiality. They wouldn't confirm whether Meghan Markle had ever been admitted. The Sussex's legal representatives stayed silent. Even Bauer's contacts within the royal institution declined to speak on record. Behind palace doors, however, concern was growing. One insider confided that even Queen Elizabeth had privately questioned the circumstances of her great-granddaughter's birth. According to this source, the Queen had asked why she had never received a private hospital photo, not for public release, but for the family. That photo, they said, never came. The same source claimed that Prince Charles had also voiced concern in private, but was advised not to press the matter further, for fear of igniting another media storm. What struck Bauer most, based on his compiled timeline, was that aside from Meghan and Harry themselves, no one in the royal family, or even their closest friends, seemed to have seen Lilibet in person during her first year. There were no reports of visits, no casual family introductions, no offhand mentions of time spent with the baby. Even in Meghan's many virtual appearances and public Zoom calls, there were no signs of a child in the background. No baby cries, no toys, not even a fleeting blur. Lilibet appeared to exist only in curated Instagram moments and heavily controlled public releases. For a time, skeptics chalked it up to extreme privacy. But Bauer wasn't buying the privacy excuse. Privacy doesn't explain altered documentation. It doesn't account for the complete lack of third-party verification. And it certainly doesn't justify the inconsistencies in interviews, or the contradiction of asking the media to respect their children's anonymity while simultaneously releasing curated images and subtle references that bolstered the Sussex's global brand. Then came a pivotal development. One of Bauer's anonymous tech sources forwarded a compressed data file containing archived server logs and internal notes from a social media management firm that had briefly worked with the Sussex's digital team. Buried in the logs were entries labeled visual strategy assets, children. At first, Much of the content appeared to be typical marketing prep. But one entry stopped Bauer cold. Lilibet underscore still underscore asset underscore V2 underscore final underscore April underscore 23. The problem? Lilibet wasn't born until June 4th. Why would a finalized image asset bearing her name exist 6 weeks prior to her supposed birth? The implications were enormous. Was this content being prepared for a child not yet born, or for one that perhaps never was, at least not in the way the public had been led to believe? Bauer followed up with a former employee from a firm. The individual wouldn't go on record, citing strict NDAs, but admitted that some of the image files had been pre-approved and watermarked by a third-party branding consultant. These weren't taken during real-time family photo shoots. They were handed over, ready to be published on cue. When Bauer presented this to a veteran editor at a major U.S. newspaper, her response was blunt. If this were any celebrity couple, I'd call it strange. But when it involves royals, it's more than strange. It's alarming. And that alarm was spreading. Online, users began compiling every public appearance, or more accurately, every absence. In one video, Meghan gave a heartfelt talk about motherhood during a virtual summit, but the setting drew criticism. No baby items in the background, no toys, no signs that an infant had ever been present. In another interview, Harry talked about sleepless nights with the baby, comments that directly clashed with Meghan's earlier claim about successful sleep training. The inconsistencies were adding up fast, fueling both online speculation and Bauer's growing dossier. But speculation, no matter how compelling, would only go so far. If Bauer wanted his case to move beyond media headlines and into institutional accountability, he needed irrefutable proof. That's when he began discreet conversations with legal experts on both sides of the Atlantic. Could courts in the U.S. compel the release of birth records? Could questions of royal succession create legal standing in the UK? The answers weren't straightforward. In the United States, birth records are protected unless a criminal investigation is underway. In the United Kingdom, Parliament has no history of verifying the legitimacy of royal children born abroad. However, one constitutional scholar pointed out a potential opening. If a child were proven to be ineligible for succession due to fraudulent presentation, the matter could, in theory, be investigated by royal advisors and the Privy Council. It would be unprecedented, but not impossible. What started as a journalistic probe had now evolved into a constitutional dilemma. Lilibet's existence, or her questionable documentation, was no longer a matter solely for her parents. It had become a question with implications for the monarchy and the British nation. If the title of princess had been awarded under false pretenses, or if falsified records had been used to claim royal recognition, the consequences could be nothing short of historic. The Sussexes could face the loss of their remaining royal associations. Public trust could collapse, and the carefully cultivated Sussex brand, already under strain, might not survive the fallout. And yet, amid the growing pile of digital forensics, conflicting statements, and legal ambiguity, one simple question haunted Bauer. If there's truly nothing to hide, why does everything seem hidden? In today's world, a single photo, a smiling baby in a onesie, a family snapshot bathed in California sunlight, can carry immense persuasive power. But what happens when those images aren't what they seem? What if they were altered, or staged, or worse, artificially generated? Bauer had long questioned the way Meghan and Harry showcased their children. Unlike traditional royal protocol, where christenings, balcony appearances, and official portraits serve as public confirmation of a child's existence, the Sussexes' strategy had been tightly controlled, minimal, and vague. They called it privacy. Bauer saw something else entirely, a meticulously managed campaign of image control. This phase of Bauer's investigation didn't begin with a legal file or a newspaper tip. It started on a screen. As his concerns about Lilibet's missing medical records began to gain public interest, online communities of amateur investigators and digital analysts turned their attention to the Sussexes' publicly released photos of both Archie and Lilibet. Soon, Reddit threads, Twitter analyses, and detailed YouTube breakdowns began to multiply. Each highlighted subtle irregularities, strange proportions, lighting mismatches, odd blurs. The deeper the collective scrutiny, the more unsettling the visuals became. One of the most talked about images was the 2021 Christmas card. Meghan is seen lifting Lilibet into the air, Harry and Archie beaming beside her. At first glance, it was festive and heartwarming. But sharp-eyed viewers flagged unusual shadows, an unnatural posture, and lighting inconsistencies that didn't sit right. One photography enthusiast noted that the lighting on Lilibet's face didn't align with the ambient light in the rest of the photo. Another pointed out that Meghan's wrist appeared to bend at an angle that would be physically implausible if she were truly holding a toddler of that size. Bauer took the observations seriously. He enlisted the expertise of Dr. Owen Briggs, a forensic photo analyst who works with government agencies and media outlets to detect visual tampering. Briggs received several high-resolution versions of official Sussex family images and was asked to examine them for signs of manipulation. Starting with the Christmas card photo, Briggs applied advanced forensic techniques, contrast layer analysis, shadow mapping, and metadata verification. His findings were unsettling. The shadows don't behave as they should, he said. For example, the shadow beneath Meghan's foot was cast at a different angle and depth than the one under Lilibet's dress, despite being illuminated by what should have been the same light source. He also noted blending artifacts around the baby's outline, suggesting that portions of the image may have been composited or digitally refined. It wasn't definitive proof that the child had been inserted artificially, but in photojournalism or legal evidence contexts, such signs are red flags. Bauer pushed forward. He asked Briggs to evaluate other widely circulated photos, such as the image shared on Archie's second birthday, showing him joyfully running through a garden with balloons in hand. That photo also raised questions. A frame-by-frame analysis revealed something odd. A reflection in a nearby glass door didn't match the form of the child in the foreground. The distorted shape suggested either a composite image or the use of layered stock visuals. Then came the 2022 birthday portrait of Lilibet, which had been widely shared. She was pictured smiling on a blanket, blue eyes shining, her red-tinged hair sparking headlines. But upon close examination, the image had signs of irregular pixelation in the surrounding grass that didn't match the rest of the photograph. More significantly, the light illuminating her face came from an angle inconsistent with the shadows cast by nearby objects, something photographers often refer to as light mismatch. Running the photo through error-level analysis, ELA, Briggs detected patches that lit up abnormally, a common indicator of post-processing or artificial element insertion. Briggs wasn't the only expert consulted. Bauer also contacted a computer vision specialist from a private AI lab. This analyst, who remained anonymous due to contractual restrictions, ran the photos through advanced detection software built to flag digitally generated or heavily manipulated images. The AI compared facial metrics, skin tone gradients, lighting coherence, and background integrity against a reference library of verified images. The results were stark. The analyst concluded with over 85% confidence that at least 2 of the Sussex children's photos had undergone facial substitution or significant digital enhancement. The software identified telltale inconsistencies, slight misalignments in eye spacing, eyebrow height deviations, and unnatural strand-by-strand variations in hair texture, markers that typically wouldn't occur in unaltered, real-life photography. What began as digital curiosity was now morphing into something far more serious. Something that raised questions not just about privacy or branding, but about the authenticity of the entire narrative surrounding the Sussex children. This didn't necessarily mean the children didn't exist, the analyst clarified. But it did raise serious concerns about why images of real children, if they were real, would be altered so heavily, especially when trust and authenticity were central to the public's perception. By this stage, Bauer was no longer just chasing rumors. He was confronting something far more unsettling. The idea that the public may have been shown images that were digitally manipulated, constructed through composite editing, or in the most extreme scenario, entirely fabricated. So he shifted focus to those behind the camera. He began reaching out to the photographers credited with capturing the Sussex family portraits. Several refused to comment. Others cited strict non-disclosure agreements. One London-based photographer who had experience covering royal events hinted that the Sussexes retained full creative control over their visuals. They reportedly dictated specific visual guidelines, and nothing was released without thorough review and pre-approval. Another source, a freelance photo editor who had worked on a social media campaign linked to Meghan's brand, recalled being instructed to enhance a series of family portraits, adjusting for symmetry, warmth, and emotional softness. None of that was unusual. Public figures often request photo editing. But what was unusual, the editor said, was the instruction to maintain facial consistency across different images, aligning the children's appearance with previously released photos. You only worry about consistency like that if you're managing perception, the editor explained, not just improving lighting. At this point, the conversation began to shift. It was no longer just a question of technical manipulation. It became a question of intention. Why would Harry and Meghan go to such great lengths to control and potentially alter how their children were presented? Was it simply a matter of privacy, protection from media intrusion? Or was it part of something bigger, an orchestrated narrative serving a broader strategic goal? To explore that possibility, Bauer revisited Meghan's past interviews, her Oprah appearance, podcast episodes, public speeches. She frequently spoke about motherhood in emotional, sweeping language. But Bauer noticed something odd. There were few, if any, personal anecdotes. No mentions of favorite toys, baby food quirks, teething troubles, those small, relatable details most parents share without even thinking. Of course, no parent is obligated to offer such insights. But for someone who had so prominently positioned motherhood at the center of her public identity, the absence of even minor specifics felt calculated. Bauer also noted a pattern in the timing of the children's photos. Each major image release seemed strategically aligned with key PR moments, just before the Netflix docuseries premiere on Meghan's birthday or during the media fallout over Harry's memoir. To Bauer, these weren't random family moments. They were tactical moves. The children weren't just being protected. They were being positioned as assets in a carefully crafted public relations strategy. As expected, backlash followed. Critics accused Bauer of delving into conspiracy territory. Supporters of the Sussexes slammed the investigation as an invasive assault on their privacy. But Bauer pressed on, armed with expert analyses, metadata inconsistencies, and an ever-growing archive of questions no one seemed willing to answer. What had started as a single suspicious detail was now shaping into what could be the most elaborate image management campaign in recent royal history. And others were beginning to take notice. According to sources within royal circles, even Prince William and Princess Catherine had privately requested a confidential review of the Sussex children's photo releases. They were reportedly concerned, not just for the public's perception, but for the integrity of the monarchy itself. One insider claimed William was especially disturbed by how tightly the Sussex family imagery was being controlled. The implications were enormous. If the photos were manipulated, and if those manipulations were used to secure titles, influence public opinion, or boost financial ventures, the consequences could reach well beyond public image. But for Bauer, it came down to a core truth. Photographs are evidence. And when that evidence doesn't hold up under scrutiny, the story built around it begins to collapse. As the photographic timeline unraveled and digital traces began to disappear, legal responses became increasingly opaque. And yet, one question grew louder with every passing week. If, as Bauer's investigation suggests, Archie and Lilibet were not presented to the world as they truly were, why would Meghan Markle take such a risk? Why would she construct something so unprecedented, so elaborate, so precarious? That question marked the shift in Bauer's work, from fact-finding to motive. Because in the murky realm of misinformation and royal optics, why often matters as much as what. People don't launch campaigns this complex without a powerful motive, something deeply rooted and carefully calculated. For Bauer, The answer wasn't a single dramatic turning point. It was a slow evolution, a mixture of public pressure, brand strategy, and the erosion of boundaries between personal life and global image. A performance rehearsed for so long, it had come to feel like reality itself. To understand Meghan's alleged motive, Bauer argues, you have to go back to 2018, the year she entered the royal fold. The world was captivated. A biracial American actress marrying into one of the most tradition-bound monarchies in the world felt historic, even transformative. Meghan brought with her the polish of Hollywood, a refined public persona, and a deep understanding of how media worked. But inside the palace, it was a different story. According to insiders, Meghan quickly found royal life cold and isolating. The institution ran on strict rules, centuries-old protocol, and a rigid hierarchy where personal identity was often suppressed beneath tradition. From the beginning, Meghan's desire for autonomy clashed with the palace's controlled media operations. She reportedly wanted visibility, influence, and the freedom to speak for herself. But the royal model favored quiet service, strategic subtlety, and earned respect over time. Tensions built, and before long, both Meghan and Harry began to imagine a future beyond palace walls. But leaving wasn't without consequences. When they officially stepped down as senior royals in 2020, they gave up public funding, official duties, and the built-in structure of royal media protection. In return, they gained something else, the chance to control their own narrative entirely. That's where Bauer suggests the shift in strategy may have occurred. In the modern media landscape, royal children aren't just heirs or family members. They are global symbols. They invite public affection, generate influence, and, in today's age of monetized identity, become valuable components of a public image. They are, in effect, soft power tools, and in some cases, commercial assets. Especially in the world of influencer branding and multi-million-dollar entertainment deals, the image of family sells. The optics of parenthood, particularly royal parenthood, carry immense emotional value. Bauer poses the uncomfortable question: did Meghan and Harry need children not only for family life, but as part of their brand? There's no denying the power of the imagery. Meghan cradling a baby in soft morning light. Harry lifting his child playfully on his shoulders. A family of 4 walking through wildflowers hand in hand. These aren't just intimate family moments. They're public statements, carefully crafted and strategically released. Each image was timed to coincide with key interviews, promotional events, or business deals, shaping an independent identity for the Sussexes outside the monarchy. According to media consultants Bauer interviewed, Meghan's status as a mother was a central part of her appeal in the U.S. The narrative of a strong, protective mother of royal children helped humanize her. It softened the criticism she faced, allegations of manipulation, conflict, and over-control, by casting her in a role millions could relate to. Motherhood made her seem grounded, aspirational. More than a duchess, it made her relatable. But Bauer didn't stop at symbolism. He tracked the material advantages allegedly tied to the couple's parenthood narrative. First came the massive Netflix deal, reportedly worth over $100 million. Industry insiders told Bauer the agreement hinged on exclusive, emotional access, an authentic family story. And sure enough, the docuseries featured brief, carefully edited glimpses of Archie and Lilibet. Then there was the Spotify deal. Meghan's podcast included discussions of motherhood and family dynamics. Public sentiment toward the couple saw a boost, especially as they emphasized their desire to protect their children from the same scrutiny Meghan had endured. Book deals followed. Harry's memoir included heartfelt mentions of fatherhood, portraying him as a devoted and protective parent. Meghan, meanwhile, began writing a children's book inspired by Archie. These projects didn't just happen to include their children. Their identity as parents was central to their appeal and message. Without that lens, much of the emotional resonance behind their storytelling would have been lost. Bauer took the investigation further, examining financial disclosures, charity events, and private investment portfolios linked to the Sussexes. In at least 2 nonprofit campaigns, materials reference their role as parents. One wellness brand tied to Meghan's image highlighted her maternal perspective in shaping her advocacy for mental health and empowerment. Across their ventures, the pattern was clear. The children weren't just part of their family. They were foundational to the public image and business empire Meghan and Harry were building. And that's not unusual in today's influencer-driven culture. Parenthood is powerful currency. Influencers with children see higher engagement, stronger emotional loyalty from followers, and more lucrative brand partnerships. In that context, Bauer argues, the Sussex children offered not only emotional weight, but also economic value. They were not simply present in Meghan and Harry's new public life. They were central to it. For celebrities, children often serve as an ongoing narrative, one that the public follows with fascination. People want to watch them grow, evolve, and thrive. Whether frequently visible or kept largely out of sight, children naturally become extensions of their parents' personal brand. Meghan and Harry's children were never overexposed, but their appearances were always deliberate, perfectly timed. Still, Bauer sensed that the polished image alone didn't explain everything. He dug deeper into the psychological forces that may have shaped Meghan's choices. Former friends and colleagues describe her as someone with long-standing ambition and a remarkable ability to reinvent herself. She had transformed from actress to activist, blogger to duchess, and most recently, from public figure to protective humanitarian mother. Each evolution was calculated and carefully executed. But motherhood offered something none of those roles could, a sense of permanence. One behavioral expert consulted by Bauer called it legacy syndrome, a phenomenon where public figures who feel misunderstood or rejected become deeply fixated on leaving behind something lasting. For someone who has endured public scrutiny, she said, children offer control. They represent something no one can take away. It cements status, protects identity, and offers emotional security in the face of instability. Another psychologist pointed to what she called the myth-making effect. By keeping the children partially hidden, Meghan was creating mystique. The absence invited curiosity, even devotion, while giving her full control over how, when, and why the children were seen. Their limited visibility became a presence in itself, a tool of influence rather than protection. But even the most compelling theory of motive must connect to tangible actions. Bauer saw those actions not just in branding, but in the potential legal implications. By publicly positioning the children as heirs, the Sussexes weren't just presenting a family. They were staking claims. Claims to status, claims to titles, claims to influence within the media and royal narratives. This positioning could have strategic weight in a future lawsuit, a custody dispute, or an inheritance battle. Introducing children into the equation complicates legal challenges, garners public sympathy, and within the royal structure, places the monarchy in an impossible bind. To question the children's legitimacy would require the institution to cast doubt on its own. But saying nothing allows any potential deception to go unchallenged. In effect, it's a form of narrative checkmate. It's a situation so delicate that no one inside the palace seems willing to make the first move. And if Meghan orchestrated all of it with intent, Bauer suggests, that it might be her most sophisticated act of narrative control yet. Still, he left room for another interpretation. Perhaps the origin of the alleged deception wasn't malicious. Maybe it began with a simple desire for privacy, a choice to use stand-ins, alternate images, or stage-managed appearances to shield the children from the public eye. But as time passed and the stakes rose, with massive media deals, book contracts, and global attention, the line between protection and projection began to blur. The story hardened, the edits deepened, and soon, what may have started as a protective instinct became an untouchable image machine. Regardless of how it began, the end result remains the same. The public is left guessing. The palace stays silent, and Meghan and Harry sit atop a highly curated narrative that no one seems prepared or empowered to dismantle. Yet as Bauer's findings continue to circulate and legal discussions grow louder, the question of motive becomes harder to dismiss. Because if the children were invented, substituted, or digitally constructed, even in part, this isn't a story about privacy anymore. It becomes a story about manipulation on a royal scale. Long before she became the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle understood the power of image. She had built a career in front of cameras, studied international relations, and curated a lifestyle blog that projected a perfectly edited version of herself. While other royals were shaped by centuries of protocol and guided by palace press advisors, Meghan entered the institution already fluent in media strategy. And it was this media fluency, not her title, not her fame, that would ultimately form the foundation of her empire. By the time she left the United Kingdom with Prince Harry, Meghan had become one of the most divisive figures in modern royal history. To some, she was a courageous reformer taking on an outdated establishment. To others, she was a shrewd strategist repackaging royal cachet for personal gain. But regardless of where one stands, Meghan understood one thing with absolute clarity: whoever controls the narrative holds the power. And that belief would become the cornerstone of everything that followed. After the highly publicized Megxit in 2020, Meghan and Harry were no longer bound by the royal family's traditional media constraints. Freed from palace communications teams and protocol-driven press strategies, they seized the opportunity to take complete control of their public image. Rather than participating in press conferences or engaging with the UK media, they pivoted to exclusive, hand-picked interviews. They bypassed the traditional press altogether, opting instead to connect with audiences directly through high-profile streaming deals, podcasts, and curated partnerships. They didn't counter every rumor. They deflected them through strategically timed reveals, emotional content drops, or by simply ignoring them altogether. And for a time, that strategy worked. But while the public was watching the polished surface, Tom Bower was watching the machinery behind it. What he uncovered suggested that Meghan's grip on the narrative wasn't just tight, it was industrialized. The first pillar of this media architecture was access. From the outset, Meghan and Harry tightly controlled which journalists could cover them, only selecting those they believed would portray them positively. In the UK, this defiance challenged the long-standing royal rota system, which governed media access to the royal family. The Sussexes openly questioned the rota's fairness and legitimacy, cutting ties with major tabloids and even initiating lawsuits against outlets that published critical or invasive stories. Instead, they chose allies. In 2021, Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey for an interview that was both intimate and symbolic. Filmed in a relaxed California setting, far from the formal rooms of Buckingham Palace, it was a declaration of independence. But it was more than just a conversation. It was a cinematic message. From the lighting to the sound bites, from emotional pauses to choreographed vulnerability, every moment seemed crafted to build empathy and portray Meghan as a wronged outsider. The interview made global headlines overnight. It reshaped public perception of the monarchy and solidified Meghan's transition from actress and duchess to an icon of emotional authenticity. She was no longer simply admired, she was empathized with. But Bower began to notice something else beneath the surface, a pattern. Each of Meghan's public appearances, whether in interviews or op-eds, seemed to align precisely with strategic moments: new product launches, brand announcements, or crises needing softening. When Archetypes, her podcast, debuted, she opened up about the struggles of motherhood. When media scrutiny intensified around Harry's memoir, her team released new photos of Lilibet. These weren't coincidences. They were calculated distractions. Bower documented them meticulously. During backlash over their use of private jets despite public climate pledges, Meghan appeared in a wellness-focused video. When reports surfaced of Spotify reconsidering its deal with the couple, she released a heartfelt open letter through her nonprofit focused on gender equity. When a Netflix executive anonymously questioned the couple's deliverables, a polished family photo was distributed to select outlets. The tactic became clear: meet controversy with emotion, respond to criticism with compassion, and protect the brand through sentiment. But managing the message wasn't just about timing. It was about controlling the entire production. Behind the scenes, Meghan had assembled a media operation that rivaled those of major entertainment brands. Her team reportedly included former speechwriters from the Obama administration, Silicon Valley strategists, and elite PR experts from Los Angeles. They weren't just managing media, they were producing it. According to sources familiar with Archewell, the couple's media and charity organization, there were internal teams dedicated to content planning, video editing, and digital asset management. Nothing went out without a full review. Lighting, angles, captions, everything was scrutinized and approved. These weren't spontaneous posts. They were brand-driven declarations. One former consultant described the operation bluntly. It felt more like a studio than a nonprofit. There were editorial calendars, messaging playbooks, and a strict focus on maintaining narrative cohesion. Meghan wasn't just telling a story, she was the story. And nowhere was that more evident than in the way the couple presented Archie and Lilibet. From the beginning, their introduction to the world followed a tightly controlled script. There were no traditional hospital step photos, no official confirmation from medical professionals, no candid royal family moments. Archie's first public image was a monochrome shot of his tiny feet, symbolic, distant, and highly stylized. The public's first real glimpse of Lilibet came months after her reported birth, and even then, the image was carefully edited and curated. Critics claimed this lack of transparency broke royal tradition. Supporters defended it as a necessary act of parental protection. But Tom Bower saw something more calculated. To him, these children weren't simply being shielded from the public eye. They were being transformed into myth. By tightly managing every visual and detail about their children's lives, Meghan was, in Bower's view, crafting more than a protective cocoon. She was building icons. Archie and Lilibet weren't being presented as individuals, but as symbols. Their appearances, limited as they were, surfaced in charitable campaigns, branded media content, and emotionally evocative video montages. They were omnipresent in sentiment, but nearly absent in physical presence. That absence, Bower believed, allowed Meghan's team to control the story completely. If Lilibet's appearance seemed inconsistent across images, it could be blamed on lighting. If Archie's voice was never heard on camera, it could be chalked up to parental discretion. If no extended royal family members had publicly interacted with the children, the explanation could be long-distance logistics. But to Bower, these were just convenient defenses, shielding a much more deliberate narrative strategy. What he saw was a media environment engineered to eliminate unpredictability, an image system optimized for control. And he believed it had been weaponized not just to guard privacy, but to shut down scrutiny. When critics questioned the authenticity of the children's images, they were swiftly dismissed or labeled as racist or malicious. Journalists who tried to verify birth records or timeline discrepancies ran into confidentiality laws, legal threats, and sudden roadblocks. Every attempt to dig deeper hit a wall. Every inconsistency was explained away with the language of privacy. Yet behind the polished exterior, even insiders began to feel cracks forming. Former staffers hinted at disagreements within Meghan's camp over how much of the children should be shown. One former PR assistant described an increasingly tense environment, especially when discussions about Lilibet's birth records arose. There was this unspoken pressure, one insider recalled. Everything had to be flawless. If it wasn't, it got pulled or re-edited. Another source remembered a moment during the filming of their Netflix series. They were reviewing what appeared to be a genuine family picnic scene. But when the original footage was examined, it turned out some segments had been filmed weeks apart, stitched together to look like a single event. That detail stayed with Bower. This wasn't just about touching up a photo or enhancing lighting. It was about shaping moments to fit a script. It was about creating a version of reality that served a broader message. Meghan, he concluded, had built a media structure that didn't just allow for illusion, it rewarded it. A system where the emotional impact of a story carried more weight than the factual backbone. Where perception didn't just shape reality, it replaced it. What she was doing wasn't illegal, but it was unlike anything seen before from someone tied to the royal line of succession. And that raised a final, haunting question. If Meghan could curate the public's perception of herself and her children so completely, who had the authority or the access to hold her accountable? With no palace oversight, no embedded journalists, and no external regulatory mechanisms, her narrative became the dominant one by default. And if that narrative was manipulated, the distortion could persist indefinitely, unless someone like Bauer had the persistence and the evidence to challenge it one piece at a time. Because control is seductive. It shields vulnerability. It constructs identity. It protects reputations. But unchecked, it can also isolate, distort, and deceive. And in Bauer's view, Meghan's media apparatus wasn't just a storytelling tool. It was a fortress, one built not to share the truth, but to keep it hidden from the world. Within the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, where silence is strategy and secrets can span centuries, whispers of doubt began to circulate quietly. It wasn't the internet gossip or tabloid rumors that triggered concern among palace insiders. It started with something much simpler: the absence of tradition. Royal births have always followed a well-established protocol. A public announcement, a known hospital, a christening, official photographs with senior royals, briefings with trusted correspondents. The classic scene outside hospital doors, cameras flashing, smiles carefully rehearsed, has become a signature of royal continuity. But with the births of Archie and Lilibet, none of that happened. To the public, it may have looked like modern privacy. To the palace staff, it felt like something else entirely. According to a long-serving insider who spoke privately with Tom Bauer, senior courtiers were unsettled after Archie's birth. They had received no prearranged details about hospital plans, no names of attending doctors, no briefings. Even the Queen had not been notified in advance, nor was any senior royal present during the initial days. "We were told with everyone else," the source said. "It was stunning. There's a protocol. Even Diana, in the most turbulent of times, followed it. With Meghan, there was nothing. When Lilibet was born, the sense of distance only deepened." One source said the Queen, puzzled by the silence, sent a private note requesting either a personal visit or at least a photo. The request, they claimed, was never answered. Prince Charles, often distant but rarely indifferent, casually asked a staffer whether Lilibet's christening would take place at Windsor. The reply was vague. No plans had been made. Weeks passed, then months. Still, no royal family member had reportedly met the children, not even during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Publicly, the family smiled and played their roles. Privately, tensions stirred behind palace walls. Among staff, the unease became audible in whispers. Veteran aides, footmen, even royal protection officers began comparing notes in hushed tones. Longtime employees, people who had watched generations of royal children grow up, noticed peculiar things. There were no toys visible at Frogmore Cottage. No signs of infant activity. No sounds. No sightings. It wasn't evidence, but it wasn't nothing. Yet the monarchy, true to form, remained silent. To openly question Meghan and Harry would risk setting off another explosive interview, another Oprah moment that might further fracture the institution's image. So the royal household did what it has always done in the face of scandal: retreat. Wait. Endure. Meanwhile, the public suspicion that began online quietly gained traction. While the palace said nothing, the internet said everything. On Reddit threads and Twitter feeds, amateur sleuths began piecing together timelines, analyzing photos, and comparing media statements. They weren't journalists, but they were meticulous. One mother pointed out that a baby photo of Lilibet resembled a well-known stock image. A freelance graphic designer broke down lighting inconsistencies in Meghan's maternity shoot. A data analyst created a chart comparing how many photos and videos have been released of Archie versus other royal babies like George, Charlotte, or Louis. The disparity was striking. Soon, individual theories turned into online communities. YouTube channels posted side-by-side comparisons. TikTok videos went viral pointing out inconsistencies. Archie's voice in different clips, the length of his arms, his gait. One particularly viral video claimed that Lilibet's facial features subtly changed across official photos. Nose shape, asymmetry, even her hairline. The royal family may have kept quiet, but the digital world was growing louder by the day. None of it provided definitive proof, but the sheer volume and intensity of online speculation became impossible to ignore. Hashtags began trending globally. Hashtag Where's Archie? Hashtag Show Us. Hashtag Fake Royals. Supporters of Meghan and Harry quickly condemned the movement, calling it racist, invasive, and steeped in conspiracy thinking. But for critics, and for investigators like Tom Bauer, the issue had moved beyond race. It had become about logic, transparency, and the same fundamental question Bauer was privately asking. Why can't anyone independently confirm that these children exist? As the noise grew louder, Meghan's response, according to insiders, was far from calm. It wasn't just frustration, it was fury. Her reaction was reportedly explosive. Staff members were summoned to emergency meetings. PR teams were ordered to flood search engines with positive headlines and new content to push the rumors off the first page of results. Lawyers began drafting cease and desist letters. Several YouTube videos questioning the authenticity of the children's images were removed under copyright claims. Social media accounts promoting the trending hashtags were abruptly suspended. A former Archewell staffer told Bauer that Meghan viewed the online discussion as character assassination. Another insider recalled a specific outburst where Meghan reportedly screamed at a senior communications officer following an article in a European tabloid. She felt abandoned, the source said. She kept asking, why aren't they defending us? Why isn't anyone shutting this down? The tension behind the scenes was rising. At one point, the couple even considered taking legal action against the digital analyst, but their legal team advised against it. Even if the evidence was circumstantial, a lawsuit would open the door to discovery, and that risked exposing documents or inconsistencies they might not be ready to confront. Meanwhile, another problem loomed: Netflix. Behind the scenes, the Sussex's high-profile documentary deal with the streaming giant was beginning to fray. Netflix had signed the multi-million-dollar contract with expectations: exclusive, authentic footage of royal life, family moments, and a revealing look at the couple's post-royal transformation. But what the production teams actually received was something very different. According to insiders on the production side, the content was carefully filtered. Footage featuring Archie and Lilibet wasn't captured by Netflix crews. It was pre-recorded and handed over by the Sussexes themselves. Editors quickly noticed that some of the files came with inconsistent timestamps. In several cases, sequences didn't line up chronologically. Editors were reportedly forced to bridge the gaps using generic B-roll or by reusing previously delivered clips. In short, Netflix hadn't been granted access to the children. They had been given assets. And for a platform that had promised subscribers an intimate look inside one of the most talked about families in the world, that distinction was proving to be a growing problem.